So we'll get to House File 2725. I will move that House File 2725 be referred to the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform, Finance, and Policy Committee. Representative Edelson, I know that Representative Albright is joining you for the presentation of the bill, and I will turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And after I'm done, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Representative Albright, to cover some of the details as well. Good morning, members. House File 2725 is the result of comprehensive work of the Competency Restoration Task Force, which was the result of legislation that was passed in 2019. An interim report was released in February of 2020, and this legislation is inclusive of the final recommendations of the task force. And everything that is included within is a consensus by the 25 members. The 25 members, I want to make sure that members here on this call know, included the sentencing guidelines, the Sheriff's Association, NAMI Minnesota, the State Court Administration, Direct Care and Treatment, DHS, the Board of Public Safety, County Attorneys, Hospital Association, Crime Victim Representative, as well as a reentry representative, and a Psychological Association. So just to make sure that everybody knows that we had everybody, all the stakeholders at the table when these decisions were being made. So, Madam Chair, House File 2725 does the following. It places provisions of the Rule 20.01 in statute. It establishes a process for restoring a person to competency, including putting a time frame in for the completion of a competency examination report. It establishes guidelines for continued supervision for individuals found to be incompetent to stand trial. It also creates a forensic navigator position to work with defendants in the competency restoration process and develop a plan that will connect these defendants to appropriate services. It will also allow for judges to have additional discretion that currently they do not have. At this time, Madam Chair, I would like to yield my time to my colleague and my co-author, Representative Albright, who I'm working with this legislation on.
Go ahead, Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, over the past 5 years, the number of individuals who have been found incompetent to stand trial has steadily risen. The legislation and the work by the task force, along with Representative Edelson and myself, seeks to address what we call Gaap cases. This is when a person is found incompetent to stand trial and a civil commitment proceeding is triggered. However, under current law, if a person does not meet the commitment standard, it cannot be required to participate in treatment. If the charges are for misdemeanors, charges will be dismissed and many of these individuals will not receive help and may reoffend. If the charges are for gross misdemeanors or felonies, the charges will be suspended. However, if a person does not meet the standard for commitment, prosecutors can only file notice and wait for a defendant to be restored to competency. Again, with no mechanism to ensure that a person receives treatment or restoration, our legislation does then seek to ensure people get the care they need and are held accountable, and at the same time, this legislation will address the public safety concerns that have been raised by many of the stakeholders to this task force. Madam Chair, I would yield back to Representative Edelson.
Representative Edelson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with this, Madam Chair and members, we do know that currently this bill will start to address an issue. Back in 2018, the Department of Human Services had ceased currently what they were offering at that time, which I will just say was probably inadequate as well. And so this is a beginning and a step forward to try to address the Gaap cases that we're seeing. There's been a lot of high profile cases that have been on the news. We do know that right now we are working with county attorneys. There's a few pieces that I think they would like to see for additional public safety. And we will be doing an amendment and working with them on that. And we'll be offering that in public safety. So at this time, Madam Chair, I would like to go to our first testifier.
All right, we do have several testifiers signed up. First on my list is Tim Carey. If you could unmute yourself, introduce yourself for the record, and then go ahead with your testimony.
Good morning. This says I cannot start my video. All right. Good morning. I'm Tim Carey. I'm an assistant Ramsey County attorney. I work in the commitments division and have a great deal of experience in trying to address some of the issues raised by the Gaap cases that were previously discussed. We note that in addition to the disconnect between the criminal rule and the commitment statute, there's a second gap, which is for folks who do meet the commitment criteria after a finding of incompetence. There's not sufficient support in the community once they've been provisionally discharged from the hospital at this time. The beauty of the work with the task force is that it contemplates a complete overhaul and a large-scale investment into the mental health infrastructure in the state, which has been lacking for some time. So it has been, it's a great success of the task force. I believe that the entire continuum of care is represented, from the forensic navigators previously referenced to very careful case planning when people are embroiled in the criminal court process, in addition to having a mental illness or substance use disorder. The County Attorneys Association would simply highlight the need to keep some of these cases alive in the criminal court process longer than the task force bill contemplates. I can provide some of the statutory subdivisions if that's something that that you'd like to hear about. But ultimately, we need more time for people to recompensate and stabilize in the community. And we believe that by extending the period of time that the criminal case can remain open, we have a better chance of achieving those public safety goals in addition to treatment goals.
Right. Thank you for your testimony. And we don't have to get into statutory citations right now, but I'm sure if members have questions, if you can hang around, that might be helpful. Next on the list, we have Sue Abderholden. If you could unmute yourself, introduce yourself for the record, and then go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Sue Abderholden, Executive Director of NAMI, Minnesota, and also Chair of the Competency Restoration Task Force. As was mentioned in 2019, the legislature created the Community Competency Restoration Task Force, and our charge was to identify and analyze resources for defendants who have been found incompetent to stand trial, research how other states address this issue, and develop recommendations to address the problems. And really it was created because we saw really a huge increase in the number of people deemed incompetent to stand trial, and the number of people going from jail into Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center. Those also increased greatly, and that left few beds for people coming from inpatient psychiatric units. I do want to note that this is an issue not just in Minnesota, but across the country. I had the privilege of being on a national task force to actually look at this issue. And frankly, other states are also trying to figure out, what do we do? We did try to figure out why there was an increased number. And honestly, we couldn't come up with a single answer. Certainly it could be because there's greater awareness around mental illnesses. Also was discussion around the increased use of meth and other illicit drugs, but there was no one solution. I think the task force worked well because we really had a wide variety of people at the table, and we took public input at our meetings. And I think it was critical that we had public defenders, county attorneys, forensic psychologists and examiners, DHS, especially the Drug Care and Treatment, Department of Corrections, Minnesota counties and social service departments, the mental health providers, victims, people with lived experience, and advocates. And what we found is that the current system assumes that all people found incompetent need the most acute level of care, and that most people will be committed, and both are simply untrue. The Minnesota Judicial Branch provided data that between 2016 and 2018, 3,214 people were found incompetent, 1,471 for felony charges, 1,256 for misdemeanors. Of the people with felony charges, only 46% were actually committed. While misdemeanors, as was mentioned, are dismissed if someone is found incompetent, the court can still refer the defendant for civil commitment, but only 36% of misdemeanor defendants were actually committed. On top of these Gaap cases, the task force found other reasons to create a better process for competency. Judicial branch spending rose 40% from 2014 to 2018, topping off at over $6 million spent in 2018 on forensics exams alone. Our research found that only about half of the time judges were ordering mental illness defense exams concurrently with competency exams. But a defendant should be asserting a defense if their competency is in question, making these mental illness or Rule 2002 exams inappropriate. After 2 years of work, the task force published an interim and final report with recommendations. The task force recommends a process for directing defendants to competency restoration services, developing a continuum of where and how services are provided and to which populations, addressing defendants who are not restorable and those who do not meet commitment criteria, and creating a competency curriculum that can be used across settings. House File 2725 was drafted with continued engagement with task force members and stakeholders to implement the recommendations of the task force. We worked by consensus, which means basically that no one is happy and few are adamantly opposed. We do recognize that this bill is broad and that there are further amendments that are needed. But again, I think it's important to reach consensus among all the stakeholders. Broadly, the bill does three things. It creates a process in statute when a person is found incompetent to stand trial, updating and improving the current process in Rule 20 of the Rules of Criminal Procedure. We tried to address what we call the Gaap cases, where people don't meet the civil commitment criteria, but need treatment and supports. These individuals are often frequent utilizers of both, the jails and, frankly, emergency rooms, because we never address the underlying problems. We create forensic navigator positions within the judicial system to really help people in the competency process to make sure they show up for exams, that they come to hearings, that they get connected to services and treatment, and they will help prepare plans before charges can be dismissed. Forensic navigators also help the courts carry out the work of helping people become competent again. Finally, the bill creates procedures and standards for judges to send people to community competency restoration programs, depending on the level of care that they need and public safety, instead of relying on civil commitment that has created gaps in the system. The bill includes, creating these forensic navigators and competency restoration programs in the community. There's another bill that was actually heard yesterday to create locked residential treatment facilities around the state. I think the big issue truly is, we do need funding to carry this out, but we are already spending funding that frankly is leading to ineffective results. It's very inefficient. So by filling the gaps in the system, we will actually, in some ways, I know you hear this a lot, but we'll save money in terms of the courts, the counties, and the state, but we'll be putting money into things that we think will actually have a larger impact, both on individuals who frankly are never getting the treatment that they need, but also on our communities. Thank you for the opportunity. I will mention that Elliot Ty from my staff, who really wrote the report and did a lot of the research, is also here if there are further questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next on the list, I have Bob Small. If you could introduce yourself for the record and then go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Robert Small. I'm the Executive Director for the County Attorneys Association. Thank you and members of the committee for allowing us to talk about this very, very important bill. I also wanted to thank Representatives Edelson and Albright for their patience and for the opportunity for the county attorneys to express our concerns with this bill. And we look forward to working with others to come to some agreement that is in the best interest of everybody, as well as best interest of public safety. So for the purposes of background, our association has been working on this issue for a long time. In 2017, we put together a special subcommittee of assistant county attorneys who deal with this issue every day and who see the impact of the absence of a legislative fix on public safety. And we came up with a bill in 2017 that was introduced and authored by Representative Edelson. That was House File 2904. That was in 2019, and then the task force was implemented by the legislature in 2019. And a lot of what was in our bill in 2904 was incorporated in the current bill. So I wanted the members of the committee to know that we think that the bill has a lot of very, very good and important provisions, but we think that it could be tweaked to better serve public safety. Assistant Ramsey County Attorney Tim Carey has already mentioned that, and I just wanted the committee to know that our association stands behind what Tim has talked about. And I'll stand for any questions, but thank you very much for hearing us out.
Thank you for your testimony. Next on the list, I have Commissioner Terrell Clark. Please introduce yourself for the record and then go ahead with your testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Terrell Clark. I'm a Stearns County Commissioner. I'm a board member of the Association of Minnesota Counties and a member of the Competency Restoration Task Force, along with a couple of our Maxim members to represent counties. I do want to piggyback off of a few things, particularly that Sue Abderholden referred to. While our charge was to specifically focus on competency restoration services, we also broadly focused and acknowledged the significant need for prevention, stabilization, supportive housing resources, including for those for whom competency is unlikely to ever be attainable. Much of these efforts and the needed resources occurs outside the court system, but impacts what ends up eventually coming before our courts, including before and after proceedings. So for example, I'm really proud of the work that we've done in Stearns County with our community action team that has broad representatives across our community, being able to bring down some of the frequent flyer cases that were referred to and make a difference in saving money, safety in our communities, and making a difference in individual rights. But there are still significant gaps. To be successful even in this initiative, the broader issues must also be addressed, including those outside of the purview of this bill. The Association of Minnesota Counties supports the effort to reform the way Minnesota provides competency restoration services. We'd like to thank Reps Edelson and Albright for your work, and to fellow members of the Competency Restoration Task Force for truly the deep dive into this issue for over 2 years. There is an immediate need to reform competency restoration and to enact legislation that creates a path forward for Minnesota. When the Department of Human Services announced in 2018 it would discontinue the competency restoration services for certain individuals, it created a serious gap in services in our state. Competency restoration services have long been provided by the state, and currently there's no broad infrastructure, statutory directive, or regulatory framework in place to provide these services by other entities. The Association of Minnesota Counties believes that this bill is a good step at identifying a solution, including navigators through the judicial system, and that we need to have work continued and want to be part of that work before final passage of this bill. We have concerns about the language related to pretrial supervision for those found incompetent to stand trial. And while it acknowledges we don't have a process or resources for those found unlikely to attain competency in the reasonably foreseeable future. An example would be some people with significant brain injuries, for example. Many counties don't have the resources to provide pretrial services. The bill directs the court to determine whether defendant needs pretrial supervision and gives the authority to place that person on pretrial supervision with a willing entity. Currently, and this goes back to what Ms. Abderholden said, we weren't able to come up with great fixes for everything, but the bill currently doesn't have the funding or appear to have funding for supervision, which could last up to 3 years for felony files. So as this bill moves forward, it's important we ensure the components of this program are adequately funded, a lack of sufficient state funding, or proper implementation planning could exacerbate existing inequities in access to services across the state. Currently, community competency restoration programs are not available across the state, and we know appropriate investment is needed to develop and sustain a successful service. We're committed to continuing to work with the author and other stakeholders on the bill to ensure the program is successful and meaningful when the legislation is passed. Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. I don't have anyone else on the list to testify, but I have a lengthy list of people available for member questions if we have them. So with that, we will move on to member discussion. Members, and now would be the time to raise your hand. One question I have that, not being able to go back and watch all of the meetings of the task force, I'm really interested in the forensic navigator position, but it's not clear to me from the bill what kind of background you would expect those people to have, or, would they be folks coming from like a therapist background? Would they be people coming from more of a courts background? So wondering, Representative Edelson, if you can speak to, how you guys imagine what kind of workers would fill that role.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will send it to NAMI to articulate or maybe elaborate a little bit more on this. But my understanding is the courts will be meeting to do some planning around what this person would look like. I do believe that they need to have a background, from our legislation, that they're going to have a background in mental health, but also also have a background with understanding the court system, because the navigator will actually live within the court system versus Department of Human Services. So Ms. Abderholden, do you want to expand?
Ms. Abderholden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So they won't be mental health professionals because they're not treating someone, right? In some ways, they're kind of more diverse case managers, but being in the court system, it could actually be a peer specialist. So someone who can really connect to someone who is, their mental illness is kind of, has caused them to be incompetent. It could be a mental health practitioner, but I just want to make it clear, it doesn't have to be a mental health professional because they aren't providing active treatment to that person. They're really kind of following and engaging them in this entire process and making sure that they don't fall through the cracks.
Okay, thank you. So would this be someone with a bachelor's degree in psychology? That's what I'm trying to get at. And we had the bill regarding intensive residential treatment services this week in behavioral health policy. And so for folks who are unfamiliar with that, that's sort of a facility in between, being in, locked up in a hospital and being back out in the community. And just wondering, I feel like we're not connecting the dots as far as who would fill these roles when we already don't have enough staff in the mental health system. So that's what I'm trying to get my head around, further out. Do we need to be looking at creating programs? Do we need to be looking at training, all those kinds of things? That looks like Representative Albright, if you want to weigh in, that'd be great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question that has been posed on a regular basis. And while I qualify my answer to say it's a fluid conversation, I think that you hit at a nexus in terms of we really are creating a new occupation with this legislation, because on the one hand, you really do want to identify an understanding and expertise in the mental health and the behavioral health sciences. But it's also important to note that these individuals would also really come out of an understanding from the judicial and the law enforcement perspective as well. Because much like a probation officer, if you will, it is the understanding of this legislation that there is a clerk of the court attitude surrounding these forensic navigators. Because one of the points to be really alleviated by this legislation is to make sure that those that are going into treatment that are found to be incompetent, that they don't slip through the cracks any longer, that there is some accountability for seeking and fulfilling the obligations of the court order through an analysis, through interviews, to complete their court-ordered process of potential rehabilitation or competency. So I think it's important to note that this isn't just about their mental health, but it is also really respectful and understanding of what the court system has instructed them to complete, to be held accountable for the offenses and the charges that have been brought against them.
Yeah, thank you.
Just one point on that, and I think with that, whether it's a 2-year degree in law enforcement or a bachelor's degree in behavioral health, I think it is a hybrid that the stakeholders will come together and really achieve what that curriculum looks like. And because of that curriculum, I think you'll find the types of individuals that will seek after that occupation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to get my head around how big this number is going to be. And I think, the training and what you're paying these folks to work as the forensic navigators is likely going to dictate that piece of it. So thank you for that background. We'll go to Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a bill with a lot of moving parts. And I think we could spend the entire morning on this bill asking questions and trying to get to the bottom of this issue. I work with Representative Albright over the interim a little bit on this issue because the stories are tragic, both for the victims and for the people that are committing the offenses. It's because they're not getting the help that they need. And I think some of this goes back to DHS's decision to not have the role of restoring these people. And, they say there's nothing in statute to require them to do that, but I see the complexity of this bill, and I'm wondering if at least in the interim until we get a solution, because it's going to be expensive, it's going to be complicated. We don't even have forensic navigators as a profession right now. If one of the solutions and one of the first pieces might be restoring that responsibility to DHS and put it in statute and say, you have to follow up on these people. Because what was happening as I was meeting with county people, county attorneys and stuff, was that DHS said, we're not going to track these people anymore. It's turned over to the county, and there's just again, gap where these people no one's following up on them. They're not getting the help that they need. And they're oftentimes, as we see in these news reports, a danger to society. So to me, that is one of the first steps. And it seems like, and I was glad to hear Ms. Abderholden say that there was a bill that was heard to, build more healthcare or mental health facilities. We obviously need that because one of the troubling parts of this bill is if they can't find a bed for these people, they're back out. They have to be released. The case is dismissed. And that is not a good way to handle the public safety aspect of this. And so my other broader concern is that we're turning the courts into a social service agency when, to me, this is traditionally being handled by DHS. They're the people that have the expertise in dealing with mental health and these issues. And so I'm just wondering, I don't know who this question would be, directed to, but what is DHS's role, if anything, in this bill to help with this issue? And I don't know if that's for Ms. Abderholden or one of the bill's authors.
Well, I see Representative Albright has his hand up, so I guess we'll give Representative Albright, we'll give you a shot at that one.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Lead Scott. We actually do have a bill that addresses the issue in the interim, because your points are well taken in terms of the implementation of this bill. It is not going to be quick, nor is it going to be simple. And so we readily identify that there needs to be something to stand in the gap, no pun intended, while we finalize the implementation of the larger bill. To the extent of cost, and I come from an investment background, and when you take a look at, as Ms. Abderholden said, what we are spending right now for services, whether they be through the court system or whether they be through DHS, it is uncoordinated. And that goes to your final point is when we have had conversations with DHS, and this is not to negate the efforts that they make, but no one knows what is going on. There is no coordination. There is no understanding in terms of the process by which these individuals must comply and follow through. So the two parts that our bill addresses, one, it quickly identifies who is responsible. Now, the suggestion that the court system becomes a kind of a health and human services subdivision, I would take respectfully exception with that, because I think the judicial courts actually are the point from which these individuals are then directed to seek treatment, to seek services from DHS. So it's actually the beginning of that journey for that individual, and it's directing DHS to comply with the court order, as opposed to those individuals, sadly, being lost within DHS for the various services and departments that they have. It isn't an easy program, and as the chair readily identified in her opening remarks, this is not something that fixes all the circumstances that are presented, but it is a very good foundational start to what many have said is a really tragic situation that we need to address. Will it come with costs? Absolutely. But the near-term costs versus the long-term effects in terms of community safety, public safety, as well as the confidence of the citizens in their judicial system, as well as DHS, that comes at a cost too. And so we're looking to make sure that these people come out of the shadows and become productive citizens of the society that we all want to participate in, but that they're also held accountable for the offenses that they're charged.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Edelson, and then we do have quite a few other people who want to weigh in addition to letting Representative Scott get a second chance at it. So Representative Edelson.
Thank you. And I agree with everything my co-author just said. I just want to make sure that we go back to Representative Scott's point. In 2018, when the Department of Human Services decided that they were going to discontinue the plans that they currently had, those were insufficient at the time too. And I think that's what across the states, across the US, that we're seeing is it needs to be this partnership of public and private because we don't have enough resources. So we have the demand there. So we're going to have to look and see how do we build that system. And so this will take I mean, you are pointing out exactly what is right. And you've got it. It is a messy process that we are trying to build a system that really hasn't quite been there yet. So I would like to just have Ms. Abderholden just address this as well.
Ms. Abderholden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Scott. So one of the things to remember is kind of how our system currently works. So, the state operated services, they're supposed to serve basically a small percentage of people who are committed to them and need that level of care. And that level of care is an important piece of it. Most of the people who have been deemed incompetent are never committed. And so that's that huge group of people that never even get into DHS. And the competency piece is really the courts, but the treatment piece is really DHS. And one of the problems that happens is in the way that we have our state set up is the counties are actually the mental health authority. So someone may get committed to the Department of Human Services when they no longer need that level of care, because this is about level of care, not prison, not jail. Then they are sent back through the commitment process to the county. And technically the county with their commitment case managers are supposed to be the ones, really kind of following that person into the community. So we have a lot of different actors at the table, which also makes this more difficult. But I think it's important to remember that it's levels of care that we're really talking about and how people move through that, and then making sure that they don't get lost in that process.
Thank you. A follow-up, Representative Scott.
Oh, so many. Thank you, Madam Chair. But
and Representative Scott, I will say, since we don't have the fiscal note and the details are still being worked out, it is my intention that this would come back to us after they've sort of vetted the public safety aspects of the bill. So I don't think this is the last time we'll be discussing these issues. Well, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm glad to hear that it would be coming back, because that was one of my other issues was this is going to be super expensive. And you know, when we do those pre-session, you know, what are your priorities with the local media? I say this is one of my priorities, is we need to get our head around these Gaap cases. And I've said publicly, it's going to be very expensive to do. There's no question about it. So, but this is money that we have to spend because it's an overlap of public safety and mental health. It has to be addressed. And so I guess I will end my comments there. I do have a lot of other questions, but I'm glad that it would be coming back to our committee. I think it's going to be very expensive. And I would like at that time, if not before, to hear from the courts on what their take or concerns might be on how this would work for them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Herr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I'm trying to work off two devices because I'm having issues with volume here. Chair Beckerfin, I'd just like to ask Representative Edelson just a quick question, because I know that there is a lot to be worked out within this bill yet, and I just want to thank her for bringing it forward. I just wanted to ask that since we had heard that multiple states were also facing the same issue, could she maybe just give us an idea of what other states have done to sort of address this situation, or what are the ways in which they're proceeding with this issue?
Representative Edelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Abderholden would be the best one to elaborate on this. And I think it is actually great for committee members to hear more about this. So thank you, Representative Herr, for asking that.
Ms. Abderholden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Herr. No one has quite figured it out, and several states have actually have been sued and under court orders because people have been languishing in the jails while they've been deemed incompetent and not getting services. Colorado was trying out forensic navigators. That's where we got the idea. Because I meet with my counterparts across the country, there are several bills in legislatures right now looking at how we address this. And I'd be happy to share. The national report is somewhat helpful. A lot of them talked about the need to develop your community mental health services and to make sure that you're not just committing people to state hospitals if that's not the level of care that they need, and really trying to separate out commitment from competency restoration. But no one has that great magic wand that we can just take right now. Everyone's really trying to figure this out.
Follow-up, Representative Herr.
No, just a quick question, just a quick comment, Chair Beckerfin. I just wanted to say that this is a complex situation. This bill came before me just to actually take a look at it and understand it better earlier on, and that it is the details will need to be worked out, and we will have to put funding towards this if we want to do a good job of addressing this issue, and that we could be a leader in this. I just wanted to thank Representative Edelson and Representative Albright for bringing this forward.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it sort of to Representative Albright's comments as well, we need to make investments in things, it does save us money long-term, the same way that investing in housing and taking care of people in other ways, can have benefits in that way. So I think that is an important point, Representative Herr. Representative Johnson.
Chair Beckerfin, members, I do as well have many concerns on this bill. I know why we need to look at this. It's a serious issue. I'm just wondering if when this bill was being put together, if they proposed, or if somebody from the courts is here that can give us some of their concerns on this bill. And I know the cost is going to be huge on it. Because I just want to make sure that the courts were involved in this, because it deals with the courts to make sure that statutory, not just statutory, constitutionally, they're allowed to do some of the things in this bill.
I can actually handle that one, Representative Johnson. I know that the courts were on the task force, and sort of to Ms. Abderholden's point that this is a consensus bill. So I assume, I guess you can confirm for me, Representative Edelson, but if the courts were on the task force and this is the consensus bill, I'd assume that this has their blessing. Representative Edelson.
You are correct, Chair, but we will make sure, Representative Johnson, we can have a member from the courts testify in public safety so that members do hear the court's perspective on this.
Yeah, and as I said, I mean, they didn't sign up to testify, but because this will be something that comes out of the court budget and it is, purely in the judiciary finance realm, we can address that when we have a better idea of what that fiscal note looks like. Any follow-up, Representative Johnson?
Yeah, Chair Becker-Finn, one of the concerns I have on this bill is the way it's written out. It's just people are getting lost in the system already, and now we're putting more steps into it. In some of the meetings I've had dealing with this issue, talking to some of those at the county level, they were never notified when somebody was coming off the state to the county level that they were responsible. I think we need to take a deeper dive into what happened, why these people were gapped when they're sent back from the state to the county. And on these situations where it's the state imposing this, dealing with the courts, I think the state should be 100% responsible and it shouldn't go to the counties. The counties have enough on their hands already with the issues that they're dealing with besides the court system, and the court system is part of the state. So I think that's where some of the gap came from, is because the counties were never notified that these people were coming back and they were responsible for them. So it's, and as you had, Chair Becker-Finn stated, in 2018, DHS on their own changed how they were doing things, not statutorily, they did it themselves. And that created part of this problem. We also have an issue of a lot of bed space that have been shut down. We don't have facilities for these. So I think we need to take a deeper look, and maybe not this big, huge thing that we're putting together with other bills, as we're spoken, dealing with the bed, new facilities. But I think we need to look at how those just through this court system are handled, and the state should be responsible for them and not put it on the back of the county taxpayers. Because a lot of these times, these people actually don't even live in the communities that the offense occurred in. But now if they go back living with mom and dad 3 counties away, the people in that county is going to have to deal with it. And they weren't even involved in that. So we have to so I think we have, instead of putting this on the backs of the counties by turning them back over to the county, the state needs to be 100% responsible for this.
I hope you will support the funding that would allow the state to do that. Any comment, Representative Edelson?
Madam Chair, I was just going to say, the task force really, this is not just, this issue cannot just lie in the hands of one agency. It really is the entire states. It should lie in all of our backs to do something. And so I think it's taking this comprehensive approach, which is why we have the task force, because we after DHS stopped at least the services they were giving, which were inadequate at that point, we realized that we need to begin a new process, and that new process we're trying to carve out, which I think members can see is very complicated. So thank you, Representative Johnson, though I definitely have written down some notes and would love to connect with you after the committee if you're interested.
All right, final follow-up, Representative Johnson.
Just that I don't want to put this funding that it's going to cost. And I have a feeling with the other bill that they talked about, we're looking at probably $1 to $1.5 billion for this program over a biennium. Just looking at the bill and what I'm seeing, I would be surprised if it's less than that with the 2 bills combined. So this is a serious issue. I don't want to put this money on the property taxpayer of the county. They get their funding at the county level from the property taxes. This is a state issue and not a county issue. So I think the state needs to find a way to bear the entire burden of this system, because it's those in the criminal justice, going through the criminal justice system, which is the state's responsibility, especially when you get to felony level offenses.
Representative Grossell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. don't need to look at just the top of my head. I guess I want to see this old mug. But I had just had a couple of short questions. Is this bill? Does this bill? Is there one tracking in the Senate, or is the Senate planning to hear this bill?
Representative Edelson, I don't think she can speak for the Senate, but I'm sure she can speak to what she knows. Representative Edelson.
Yes, this will be moving in the Senate as well. And we have a Republican author. I cannot remember. Is it, somebody help me out here. I have too many bills. Sorry.
Ms. Abderholden.
Senator Abler.
Thank you, Madam
Senator
Chair,
Abler.
Representative Edelson. It's Senator Senjum. And we did meet with Senator Limmer this week, who is kind of interested in the concept and I think very interested in hearing the bill.
Representative Grossell.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for that answer. I guess I didn't, maybe I missed it, but did the courts comment on this at all? The language, did they approve this language? Because I heard that they were involved in the initial task force, but what were their comments? What did they have to say about this?
Representative Edelson.
I was going to say, Madam Chair, I would call on the chair of the task force, which was Sue Abderholden, could maybe elaborate a little bit for members.
Yeah, Ms. Abderholden, and I will say again that the courts were on the task force, were involved in this, and this is the consensus bill. Ms. Abderholden.
Madam Chair, Representative Grossell, they did send in some comments, and we met virtually, especially during this last year, and one of the judges was present at the meetings and suggested changes. Now, once we kind of got the bill so that we could get it into the revisor's office in December, it isn't like we sent it out and said, everyone send in and vote yes, but everyone was told this is your chance. If you have other changes that you want to make, please send them forward. And, again, we did reach by consensus. Clearly, once things come in writing, bills get heard, people start looking at it more carefully and recognize, especially since it's such a large bill, that there may still be changes needed, which of course we are totally open to. We know this is not, having been around a long time, your first big bill is not perfect.
Representative Albright, any follow-up to Representative Grossell's question?
Yes, and I appreciate the question. And one of the things that I think is notable about the process here is the stakeholders are not antagonistic towards one another on this issue. I think one of the points that is said is it is a very large, dare I say, grand collaboration between a number of people that have grave concerns about the current situation and want to make it better. And so to that extent, I can assure you that this bill is, I don't want to say work in process, but that collaboration continues. And I would expect that you'll see some modifications in the form of a couple of amendments at our next committee stop to address some of the issues that you've heard in this committee hearing. But I just want to make sure that for the folks watching this committee hearing, as well as for the members on both sides of the table, if you will, that this is a collaboration. It is not antagonistic towards the efforts moving the bill towards a culmination where everyone agrees with the tenets and how we can make this process better for the state of Minnesota.
Follow-up, Representative Grossell.
Not really, Madam Chair. I mean, this is a problem that has been, needed to be worked on for years. We need to find a place for these people to get the help that they need, and sitting in a cell is not the place for them. So I do appreciate our authors, both of them, Representative Albright and Edelson, for bringing this forward. And I appreciate their willingness to keep working on this, to try to fine tune it, to make it the best thing possible. I guess, just one more question for either one of them. Would the money be better spent on getting some healthcare facilities moving, getting those things up and running, rather than having these people fall in this gap and then needing to create jobs for these folks to walk along with them wouldn't it be better to get the money to putting some healthcare facilities up around the state?
Representative Edelson.
Oh, I know that my co-author wants to say words, but I would just say it's both. It's yes and. But Representative Albright.
Representative Albright.
Madam Chair and Representative Grossell, I think you bring up a very, very valid point. And while treatment and behavioral sciences is important for the benefit of the people that would journey through this, the facilities are very important as well, because you can't have treatment without a treatment center. And so they do go hand in hand, and your remarks are well taken. And I think as we move this bill forward, there will be collateral bills that address the issues that you pointedly bring up that I share as well. And so this is a multi-pronged approach, and the bill that you see before this committee today is foundational in its aspects of how that treatment moves forward. And as we look at the provisions of it, we will identify those issues such as facilities, occupational career pathways, and as well as the process itself coming out of the court system and lending itself to DHS, and having everyone be accountable to make sure that people get the treatment and are accountable for the actions and charges brought against them.
Thank you, Representative Albright. And with that, I don't see any other hands up. Representative Edelson, any closing comments?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I just thank members for the great questions and discussion today. This is a bipartisan. I want to thank my co-author. We've been working hard, and all of the task force members that we will continue. I promise committee members we will continue to work on this, and we'll look forward to seeing you back in judiciary soon.
All right, thank you. And I do think, the discussion today has really highlighted that the current system does not work. And we can continue to just use that current system that doesn't work, or we can try something else. And I think that's what you guys seem to be working on. And I appreciate that. I don't usually let someone go after the closer, but Representative Scott, real quick.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I wanted to let people know that I'm going to be voting no on this bill today because I don't think it's ready for prime time, as they say around here. But I think it's obviously an important issue that I think it's a priority for me as well to get this solved, but this isn't ready yet. So I'll be a no today. Thank you, members.
All right. With that, I will renew my motion that House File 27B25 be referred to the Public Safety Committee. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Becker-Finn.
Aye.
Vice Chair Moeller.
Aye.
Representative Scott.
No.
Representative Feist.
Aye.
Representative Frazier.
Aye.
Representative Grossell.
No.
Representative Herr.
Aye.
Representative Hollins.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
No.
Representative Liebling.
Aye.
Representative Long.
Aye.
Representative Mortensen.
No.
Representative Novotny excused. Representative Farr.
Farr, no.
Representative Robbins.
No.
Representative Vang.
Aye.
And Representative Zhang.
Aye.
That is 10 ayes and 6 nays.
Right, the motion prevails, and House File 2725 is referred to the Public Safety Committee.